Hello, everybody. Welcome to our webinar about automating incident response and triage with Defender and Intezer Analyze. My name is Nicole Fishbin. I'm a security researcher at Intezer for the last 3 years, and I will be your host for today for this webinar. So in this webinar, we are going to have a few slides, really just a couple, to go over and introduce you with the quick cover of the scenario, and then we'll go to the platform where I will show you how you can use Intezer to automate triage and incident response. And of course, feel free to write any questions in the chat. We will go over them, and in the end, we will have a dedicated Q&A session. And if you're not familiar with Intezer, we have a community version that you can try, and we have an excellent blog where we post different research and general posts about security. So we will dive into the security operation. And what is very important to understand about this field is that it constantly changes. While organizations use new technologies, new platforms, and new services. And while that's great, it also serves as a new surface attack for threat actors, as a new way to get into the organization and damage. And on top of that, we see new groups, new threat actors using new techniques. So it gets more complicated to keep your organization secure. So the solution is more security tools, but those generate more alerts. And eventually, in the end of the day, a person needs to sit down and go over all of the alerts, and most of them are false positives. So we spend lots of time triaging alerts. And this process takes time, as we said, but also it requires some skills and knowledge that it's not always there. And on top of that, the teams are small. They spend time on the false positive, while there could be a true alert sitting there saying that something is going on. And as we know, in incidents, time is so super sensitive and you need to react fast. So if you spend time on the false positives and miss the real alerts, that could be something very dangerous. So there are some solutions. And one of the solutions is based on outsourcing, using another company's services to triage and maybe investigate the alerts, and then even investigate an incident and response. So those are the MDR services. And while they're excellent MDRs, we need to acknowledge the disadvantages of these services. So first of all, we're still talking about people going over the alerts. So the same disadvantages as skill gap and insufficient manpower. But on top of that, we have what comes with the fact that we are using a third-party service, and that's the difference in analysis, because different analysis can provide different results. And on top of that, the overhead, these MDR services need to divide their time between multiple customers. So you might not get the same amount of time as you would like to. And in the end of the day, these services cost a lot of money. But even with these disadvantages, even when companies pay so much money to these services, they just cannot give up on them because the security of their organization depends on these services. So this is one solution, to use humans. But what we provide in Intezer is another approach. It's an approach based on automation. So in the point of view of your SecOps ecosystem, we're sitting in the SOC level 1 and 2, right with the in-house or the outsourced. But As we said, we use a technology approach for these SOC levels. And if needed for the SOC level 3, we provide a deep forensics and hunting capabilities needed for the SOC 3 when the escalation part is coming. And what we do is we provide a deep malware analysis and threat intelligence capabilities. So what you can see from here is that we are connecting to your existing endpoint scanning tools or alert pipelines. We take all the alerts, if it's a file-based URLs, commands, and so on, and we enrich them with our capabilities, with our analysis. And the output that we produce can be used for hunting and for triaging. So for example, if we're talking about hunting, it could be IOCs and behavior analysis. And if we're talking about maybe threat intelligence feeds that you want to feed. And all of the information that we produce, first of all, you can see it in our platform. But besides that, we create a node that can be visible in the existing dashboards of these existing tools that you're already using. Or if you're using a case management, we can bring our output to these platforms as well. So basically, whenever you need the information that we produce, you can view it. And overall, what we offer is a full cycle of security operations, starting from the triage process in the SOC teams, the hunting, either if it's a proactive hunting or hunting that you're doing when you want to identify if your organization was infected by a certain threat. So we provide information for that as well. And I will show it in the demo. And of course, for the incident response, if you need a more proactive information and more support for that. So that's the full cycle that we have. And you might ask yourself, how do we differ from other solutions? And what is special about Intezer, and that what I personally admire as a researcher, is that we're able to identify reuse. And I'm not talking only about code reuse. That's like a major part, of course, but besides the code reuse, the reuse of some behavior, like the way certain malware will unpack itself or detonate itself. What we have identified over the years is that the majority of the threats are not written from scratch. No one invents anything new each time. And we are able to identify these reused samples or artifacts. So basically, that's what allows us to identify new threats or maybe variation threats. And that's what allows us to enrich the existing alerts with this vital information. So, not thank you yet. I will move to the demo part. All right. So in this section, that's what the Intezer dashboard looks like. So what we can see here is all the connected sources. So this is a representation of one of the dashboards of our customers, but in your case, it could be a connection of Defender or any other source. So it's really easy to connect a new source. There is a video and it's really straightforward. And of course, if you have any difficulties, the support team is always there to help. So once the source is connected, we pull all the alerts, and that's what you can see here, the amount of open alerts. And from each alert, we will extract the files and the URLs. So overall, you see much more artifacts. And all of these artifacts are analyzed using our unique engine and triaged. So that's what you can see here in the bar. And what is visible right away is that half of the alerts are false positives. We were able to mark them as trusted, meaning that we found very strong links to known known and trusted applications. So already as an analyst, you can focus your time and attention to half of the alerts that you had. And from this amount, you have 30%, almost 30% that is malicious. And as you know, not all the malware are the same. So what I mean by that is that if you have an information stealer and a possibly unwanted application, you will treat them in different ways. The same goes for ransomware and other sorts of threats. So that's exactly what we provide in the next stage, which is the clustering, where we take all the malicious files and URLs and all the artifacts, and using our code reuse, string reuse, and all the other reuse technologies to basically create clusters. And what it means is that each alert is classified with the appropriate information. So here, for example, we can see lots of possibly unwanted software and other information stealers like Agent Tesla, right here, Formbook, and so on. So we realize that you probably have lots of dashboards. So at this point, I will switch to the Defender dashboard, because as I said in the slides, all the information that we provide, you can see it in the notes, in the dashboard, or the platform that you're using. So the first thing that we'll see is the first alert right here. So what we see here is some sort of a product name, severity low, and category malware. And if we will scroll down, we will get to the Intezer node. What we can see is that we were able to identify it as a riskware and possibly unwanted software. So as an analyst, I might want to get more information besides this classification, and I can open the link right here. And this is the alert view. So what you can see here straight away is that we identify it as Nearsoft, which is a very common producer of different software that can be used both for legitimate purposes and both for attacks. So that's what we call an admin tool. And what we see here is that it requires a user action, but as an analyst, I can directly understand that we're not talking about something severe. It's possibly unwanted, so I can prioritize it not as high, and maybe even I have a playbook for that in my organization, and I will handle it right away. Maybe I will close it. But what is important to understand about this screen is that we are using both the information from the alert, as you said in Defender, and this is the information from our analysis. And combining all together, we were able to produce this verdict. So I might even close this alert and move on to the next one. So we'll move to the next one. And what we see here is some sort of an SVE, an exploit here in the category. And we can open the tab, see if we have some sort of recommendations. Looks kind of a generic, I did read it, not just think, but it looks generic, not something that is specific for this CVE. And once again, we can go down here and open the link. And before that, we actually see its Formbook, which is information stealer. So right away, I can understand that we're talking about a real alert, something that we need to prioritize, first of all, and take seriously and investigate. So if I will open the tab right here. All right, so what we see here, first of all, the same CVE, an exploit, Formbook, and a generic threat requires an action. Once again, we have all of the information from the alert, the host name, the OS, and the file name. And right here is the information that I, as an analyst, can directly use and understand more or less what I'm dealing with. So first of all, I understand that we're talking about formbook. It's a sort of a malware. So right away, I know what kind of threat this alert possessed. We have the TTPs. So right away, I see process injection and execution. So that's very suspicious and with a very high severity, I would say. And here are the recommendations for the actions. So even if I'm not as skilled as maybe as my supervisor, but right away I understand that I need to quarantine the endpoint and I need to kill this process. I have a list of IOCs that I can use maybe to start some kind of a hunting process, see if the endpoint tried to reach these IOCs, see if the IOCs were used in my environment, and so on. So at this point, as an analyst, I think I have enough information to understand, first of all, what are my next steps, and even escalate to the next support SOC levels. And if I will put my, for example, the research hat as someone that will maybe have to deal with this threat, investigate and understand what happened, from my perspective as a researcher, I would say that, first of all, the IOCs, the URL looks very suspicious. So that's something that we definitely need to investigate and understand where did it come from, maybe geolocation, and what was dropped from this URL. So that's something that Intezer can do as well. And we talked about this CVE, and I can say that it's a very famous CVE in the equation editor in the Microsoft Office suite. And it is very commonly used by RTF files that exploit the CVE. So if I want to understand the full execution chain, I can go to the analysis page. And once again, could be a bit overwhelming for SOC level 1, but if we're talking about handling an incident and taking the response a bit further, so this screen can be very useful because you can see the full execution tree, the full process tree, right from the RTF file that exploited the CVE, and then we saw this IOC, so it probably downloaded this file, which looks like a loader, and eventually the payload, which is formbook. And all of the conclusions that I made right now are based on this process tree and the behavior tab. But of course, besides that, we have the TTPs. These are the same TTPs as we saw in the alert page, maybe a bit more detailed, but the essence is the same, and the same IOCs. And of course, once we identify the threat, we need to respond, we need to start a detect and hunt process. So we have the capabilities for that as well. So here we can choose the artifacts that we want to use in our hunting process. So for example, the file names, the process trees, and the suspicious URL. And we can generate rules for that. So with these two alerts, I covered the way Intezer can be used in automate the triage and response process. So now I think we will move to the Q&A section, and I will see what questions were asked. And feel free to add more questions to the chat. All right, sorry, I just had to read it. So One of the questions is, please specify input taken and the output while coming to the product. All right. So I will go right here. So the input that is taken is first of all, the binary files, and also URLs and LOTL, meaning command line that were entered, and all of them are analyzed. So if it's binary, that's like our usual way of analyzing a binary file. And for URL, we have our URL analysis tool. So that's the input. And the output is, as you saw, first in the alert view and then in the analysis. So we process either the binary or the URL. We can execute it or analyze it statically, extract the IOCs, the TTPs, and all of that information, and output to whatever platform you're using. Threat intel enrichment from third party or any specific intel you can tell about. So if you're asking about if we're using intel enrichment tool in our platform, so we're using URL reputation. And as you saw, we use virus total, but not as a way to provide, not like in a way that replaces our engine. That's just another platform to say whatever it is a malicious or not, like provide additional information, not that it comes instead of our information. So if you don't have any other questions or you come up with more questions, feel free to reach out, and thank you for coming.